All right, it's Brad Pryor with Grit Branded today. We are at the NCHA 2024 Fraternity Finals, and I'm here hanging out with Andy, got it jacked up, Andy Chason. Chason.
Yeah,
Golly, we talked about this for an hour already.
Yeah, well, we talked about a lot of other things.
So tell me what's going on with you, your story, and what we're doing here today.
Okay, well, I'm a videographer by trade, so that scope of that is widely varying. You know, there's commercial production, there's live production, there's post-production, there's all these different, there's film, there's all these different sub-industries within the industry. And I've been fortunate enough to kind of dabble in all of it. Currently, I have a production company called Plugged In Creative. And so right now, the reason I'm here at the Futurity is I have a annual contract with NCHA to produce pretty much any video need that they have that kind of is more niche or they really need to look good. You know, I think we pride ourselves on production value. You know, I've done some post-production stuff for commercials. Yours, actually, we did one for Rafter P. I'm proud of. It's one of my favorite spots. And working with you guys, that was pretty great. But I'm here because of NCHA and become a super fan of this industry, and really want to be able to look back and say that I had a small part in helping it, you know, be on the platform that I feel like it deserves to be on.
Right. You had an interesting concept when we were warming up a while ago, so to speak. So you're talking about how the NCHA kind of parallels with how NFL is.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about some of that because you've only been around this for 2 years.
Yeah, so the learning curve has been steep. The one thing about whenever you're doing either as documentary or promotional things, you know, there's fact-finding missions that you're on to really become a kind of a mini expert in whatever thing you're shooting in order to do their best job. Because if I don't understand the nuance of whatever it is I'm shooting, I'm going to misrepresent it. And so in my gaining understanding of this industry, the thing I really became a fan about is just how nuanced it is. And the only industry that I think that really parallels it from a sporting aspect is professional American football. And it's because there's the game within the game, and there's so much that's beyond your control, and there's so much at stake, and there's it's team aspect, and there's all these elements that parallel, even down to like the defensive players, the way they have to backpedal and mirror their opponent to keep them from getting past them. It's just like that for the horse backtracking when it makes its turn so they can cut that cow off. I mean, there's so many parallels to football, and it's been really cool because I'm a huge football fan. I love American football, and so it's I see that a lot in this industry, and it's pretty special.
Yeah. And I think the better job we do explaining these kind of things gets people more into what we do on the day.
That is hard, too. So we just produced a video, and you'll see it. They'll play it in the pre-show of the Futurity here, and they played it at World Finals in the pre-show. And it's what is cutting. And, like, trying to explain that concisely can be difficult. I know that for the trainers, they've said when asked that question that they'll parallel it to something else. Oh, it's the point guard kind of defends so you don't make the three-pointer, or it's the defensive back, or it's a border collie, the way that they try to herd cattle or sheep. But they don't ever say what cutting is. And so, like, to concisely say, this is its origin, this is how it's scored, this is the objective, these are the people involved, in a minute and a half is very, very hard to do. When I sat down to write that, my initial short script was 4.5 minutes. And so even me trying to be brief wasn't brief enough. Right. We were able to get it down. I think it does a pretty good job of that. So that'll end up living on NCHA Films on YouTube. So next time you're on an airplane and somebody asks you, hey, what is cutting? Why are you into this? What do you care? You can play that video and kind of explain to them pretty concisely of what it is.
Oh, makes sense. That's a good way to learn it, too. You know, at least a brief way.
Yeah, well, we can sit here and talk for 2 hours about, you know, just even the nuance of judging cattle. I mean, it's the veil over my eyes of following. So right now I'm working on a project where I'm following a trainer and having them mic during a settle. I've learned more about cutting from that than I ever did watching them work. You know, I mean, it is the amount of detail that goes into just selecting the cow is really crazy. And everybody's got different methodology, even from training. You'll go watch them in the practice pen and how one trainer, both of them elite, work a flag or pre-work a cow, or just even how they rehab their horses. It all varies. They all have different styles and ways that they do it. And no one way is right or wrong, really. It's just what works for them.
Right. And watching them when they are settling and all that, and then in the run, watching them all take notes.
Oh yeah. Well, you gotta mark that cow off, right? And even it evolves. I didn't realize like how much what they mark or star as their cow they want can change in a set based on how they react when the previous competitor is cutting a cow. So they're separating that cow, and there's that 2 or 3 that peel off, and they may change their feeling on that cow, because I mean those cows are just like us as people. Like, their mood can change, demeanor can change based on the scenario that they're in, and so they're constantly reevaluating that. And that's all they communicate, literally up to the time that they're riding in, even during their run. They're communicating, where's that cow at? Because sometimes the cow you want, you're like, that's the one, is just in a bad spot. And you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're not going to be able to cut that well. And you might lose that cow or have a bad cut, get a minus cut. Like, there's a lot of strategy that goes into this. And these guys are mentally tough.
Got you. So let's talk about your story a little bit.
Okay.
So you're from Monroe, right?
Yeah, Monroe, Louisiana.
And relocated up here and got with us.
Yeah, I moved here to Fort Worth area. I live in North Lake now, and I bought the house last October, but we moved over officially in June.
Got you. So talk about your raising, how you got into this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a pretty cool story in itself.
Okay, so growing up, my dad had a hunting and fishing show. And it's kind of my dad's shadow growing up. I always wanted to be wherever he was. And so I'd be in the boat, and I kind of took interest in the cameras. And because I didn't really have anything else to do, I couldn't be fishing while he's fishing on the show,
Right.
So I played with a second camera, and then I would go to his post-production house that was doing the editing. And I would hear him, complaining about what the cameraman wasn't doing correct. And to give a little context, you would think like, okay, the guy editing a hunting and fishing show probably doesn't have very much experience. But the guy actually was a B film guy, film industry guy, and live sports guy. So I got some really good fundamentals in the industry, visual principles, and those kinds of things. And so I heard him complain about what they should do right. Well, one day my dad has a cameraman get sick, and so I had to fill in. And when he brought the stuff to the editor, he was like, man, this is better than the guy you're paying. So my dad's thinking, free cameraman, right?
Right.
So I did that from the time I was 10 until I was 20. And then after that, I worked for some small production companies, and I'm doing some work with ESPN. And then I did some national hunting fishing shows, primarily hunting shows, Hunting Across America, Mojo Outdoors TV, and I shot some for Buck Commander as well. And ended up working for an ad agency, went back to college, graduated, worked for an ad agency. Kind of really opened my eyes to how you can make money as a creative, which I had never seen. I'd seen people struggle pretty hard to do what they love. So to marry those two things together was pretty cool. And then that led to me creating my own production company. And then, that has pivoted. Like now, today, we're going to be doing a live multi-camera production for the Futurity. And I didn't think I'd ever do live production again. So you just don't ever know where it's going to lead you.
Right. And how many cameras are involved in that?
We're going to have 5 cameras tonight. So there'll be 1 camera in the booth for our commentators. There will be 4 on the floor. There's a camera under the stands. So it'll be a little bit lower than the traditional shot you're used to seeing straight on. There's one on the balcony on the second tier that's quartered. That will kind of, like, as they're coming through the herd, so you can see the whole herd as they're pushing them. There's a reverse camera to show the guys riding into the herd, turning back into the herd, and for replay. And then there's a 4th camera that kind of is a transitional carry riders in and out from a different angle, because sometimes they enter from one side, sometimes they enter from the other. Same thing on the exit. So you get blitzed, or like where you can't see them. Something
Right.
obstructs you, like the judges stand. So you got to have cameras at different positions.
Got you. And then you have, what do you call it, a camera truck sitting outside?
Yeah, so there's a production truck outside, and so they're running a video switcher, a replay system. There's an audio technician, and there's an engineer whose job is to make sure all stuff's working properly.
Got you. Sounds like a lot.
It's a lot, and it's a lot to manage, and there's a lot of pre-production that goes into that too. So we're going to have an opener that features Mel Blount, who is an NFL Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time, who's into cutting. He's been into cutting since the 70s, actually. And he's setting up the intro to the show and kind of giving you the context of what it's like to be a champion and in paralleling football to cutting. It's a pretty cool deal. It was an honor to get to help write a story for a guy that's a living legend in that industry, and seeing all those same believed parallels that I have of how football and cutting have a lot in common.
100%. How long have you been working on that?
We've been working on that pretty much since last Futurity, as far as developing the storyline of how we want to open this package. There's been some kind of like God wink moments where, I see. We'll go back to 2021, the first Futurity I was at. I see this woman doing champion interviews. There's just stellar on camera and a great person off camera, and Courtney Dehoff. And just mental note: if we ever get a live broadcast, that's my play-by-play commentator. and then move down the line. I'm at Super Stakes or Summer Spec, can't remember which one, and I see Mel Blunt standing in the lope pit, and I was like, man, that's a legend. Like, that guy cuts, and so I was like, middle note, and so it's kind of all culminating towards this. We have a lot of cool packages. You guys present Loper of the Year award. That's a package we're going to get to show, a video package that we built out about the Loper that won the Loper of the Year this year, and get to hear her story and what that means to her to be recognized. So that's pretty cool that you guys do that. So we'll get to show that in the broadcast. There's also a deal for the foundation about the legacy, what you can build, legacy you can build for yourself, and donating through the foundation to help, raise awareness of this industry and sponsor youth and all the different things that the foundation does. So it's a lot of opportunity we have in these broadcasts and these long settles to capitalize on that downtime to really showcase what our industry is in front of what's a pretty big audience. I want to say the numbers last year were somewhere around 1 million streams of the finals.
Oh, wow.
Which is impressive audience, even from a national perspective. There's a lot of big major sports that don't have that kind of viewership. So for it to be an online viewership to have those kind of numbers is really impressive.
Well, and I think this is something too. I did a podcast with Jay with the NCHA, and he kind of explained this. And I don't know why I've never caught been on the cutting industry for a long time. But this is the first time these horses are actually showing.
Yeah, it has to be the first time. So they'll do what's called a pre-work. So it's basically a mock show where they'll get together and try to simulate just the same way you would a scrimmage or a preseason game. They try to get these horses some experience of what a show experience might look like, but they can't have shown before. So, you don't know what you have till you get here and drop your hand for the first time. And what blows my mind is that there's nearly 700 horses entered in the Open for the Futurity. Yeah. And so there's a 3% chance you make the finals. And at the end of the list, there's 20 horses being shown. And there's somewhere around, I think it's like 18 riders, because I think Matt Gaines has 2. And of the list, there's pretty much the same faces that you typically see in the finals. So for them to be that consistent, given there's so much uncontrollables, and by uncontrollable I mean what set you're in. So is that set of cows as strong as the previous set or the set following it? Where your draw is in that set? Are you last out? If you're going to, or do you have pick of the litter at the top of the set? You're on an animal that's got its own mind, and you're separating another animal that has its own mind, and you've got to relinquish control and default to their breeding and training and hope that they do it.
Yep.
In addition to not knowing whether they will or not. And there's 3 years of training that leads up to that, whether they bought them as a 2-year-old or they started them themselves or somebody in their program did. So there's a lot at stake. Some of these horses, and you'll see it in the Western Bloodstock sale that's going on over there, some of those graduates from that sale can go over $1 million.
That's crazy.
And so that is a lot of pressure on that trainer to produce success. And so I can't imagine the tremendous amount of pressure that they're under, knowing that the hours that they put in. And all of the owners that I've interviewed will tell you that no one puts more pressure on them than themselves. And so the ownership doesn't feel the necessity to put more on them. Right. If anything, they're more understanding when it doesn't go well, because especially if they show themselves, they know it can go wrong and not be your fault.
Right. And that's a cool thing I like, too, about some of these trainers. They take some of the owners, too, and then let them be in the amateurs, let them cut.
And
work with them as well.
And I got to think it's in its own challenge, because, your limited experience as an amateur or non-pro can do damage to the training that's been done for that horse and can affect their outcome in the Open. That's why you see at this show we end with the Open, because they're the only one that's able to show that horse. But in the aged event stuff, like the 4-year-old, the 5-6, like they show the Open first, get that out of the way, and then the non-pros and the amateurs go, because if they're riding that same horse, you don't want to be showing it when the big money's on the line after your amateur, your non-pro is showing it, because it can. I heard James Payne say that to a rider one time, that you're gonna regress this horse, and I'm gonna have to take it. But that's what they're there for. They're there to learn. The horse is teaching the rider a lot of times.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I think a lot of this too. You coming in the industry for a couple years ago, working in the hunting industry and the fishing industry. I've been a part of a TV show where I was hunting and being filmed. I had no idea how much work and staging happens after it all happens.
Yeah, a lot of times in those situations, you're doing a lot of stuff in reverse, because you don't want to dedicate a lot of time to something that may not have a successful outcome. And so a lot of times you're back recreating, and also your limited positions. I can't get 5 camera angles in the woods. I remember when I first started shooting football, and I had heard how hard it is to shoot football. I was shooting handheld from a sideline. And I remember thinking how easy this is. I was like, you mean I can move and it doesn't matter if anything sees me? Like, this is easy,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it really set the groundwork for me to be a good operator, because I don't have an opportunity to say, hey, could you do that again? Because once you make that shot, it's over. Or once you set that hook, it's over. And so I learned a lot there. I learned a lot about just making do with what you got, because you got to use the natural light that's out there. You got to use the gear that you can afford if you're financing it yourself. And so I didn't get to use the excuse of I don't have what I need or whatever. You just got to make it work. And then you go into live, it's kind of the same thing. And then in post-production, that really set me up for success. So I think what I'm able to do here for NCHA during these sets, where there isn't a lot of controllable, where I can make, when I'm filming those stuff for myself, for like the hype videos and stuff, I can shoot it by myself and make it look like we got 10 cameras, because I can maximize my time and I know what I need, and I'm editing in my head as I go. And so all these different situations I've been in really kind of culminated to be an asset, and I hope so, at least in this industry, to where I'm able to bring light again to something I think is pretty special.
Well, working with you when you create our commercials and stuff, I was always leery. I've worked with people, videographers, I've worked with production people before, and it's not always been the best. But when you showed up, you had it all figured out. When you wrote script, just gave you a little bit of information, and you wrote script that was like amazing. Like, I goes a long ways with all the stuff you're doing.
Yeah.
You make it so simple.
Well, thank you. And there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes for that to happen, but it's more. I think I've always said that, like, we're not necessarily just videographers, in that, like, you tell me where you want me to put the camera. It's much more of like marketing. It's much more of like understanding a story. I think mostly we're just visual storytellers. We're just here to like tell a story. So I got to learn what your story is so that I can best convey your story. And getting to meet your team and see you guys, the way that your team, the camaraderie within your team, the way that you guys approach a job site, and just the level of professionalism, and then back to the theme of that spot, the grit that it takes to run as many job sites that you are running at the level that you're running it. Like, it's like, well, that's something I can work with, because that's something I can believe in.
Right.
And like, when you can believe in whatever you're doing, it's easy to write a thing. It's when you got to make it up when you don't think it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned to just kind of walk away in this situation. Thanks, but no thanks. Kind of deal.
And that's the same way when we're dealing with the customer at Rafter Peas. We're not going to be able to either please them or be able to build exactly what they want. Right. They don't even know, and we can't get enough information out of them. And you got to find a way to separate yourself.
Yeah, and I can't imagine how incredibly difficult that is. I know that even with my industry, I've got to make concessions at times, because ultimately I want to have a desired outcome from the client. But there's some times where, like, I can't deviate from what I believe is the best solution for you. It may not be something you want to hear, and we may not even be able to come to terms on it. You might have to, if it's something I'm willing to die on a hill about, then, like, I'm going to die on that hill. I'd rather walk away prior to an agreement than you think I did a bad job or took advantage of you or anything like that.
And I think that's where a lot of people in the industry, they just don't get it. They just keep hard charging, they keep going backwards.
Yeah.
If they just take a moment to think about what's going on, if it can facilitate what their needs, then
I could talk 2 hours about this, but I'll try to be as concise as I can. I think you should do something because you want to serve the person you're doing it for first, and money will come. Right. If you're focused on money first, then it's not going to come out. But if you will just sort of work, like, how do I get better so I can do a better job for somebody, and solely focus on that, success and money will come.
100%. Yep, I agree with that. So what would define your grit?
My grit?
Yeah. What we've been talking about.
Man.
Kind of the edge of it right there.
Yeah, man. Kind of got me with a gotcha question. I think we're resilient. I think we're willing to do whatever is necessary to do a good job, even at the expense of our own selves. I mean, we were up here till midnight last night, and I left the house this morning at 7 a.m. to get back at it, and I'll be up here tonight till midnight again. And then Sunday, I'll go in there and I'll start working on the event recap and get that edit done before I take any personal time for myself post this show, because the job's not done until that event recap video is done.
Right.
And like, that's part of it, and I have to quantify that within my own family. I'm married, I have 2 kids, and so, like, I have to say, okay, it's the nature of my business. I have to sacrifice this time today, but we can make that time up elsewhere. I just got to make sure that I don't completely forfeit my relationship personally. So there's that aspect of it you got to balance too. So, I think what defines us is definitely, from a grit standpoint, is just resiliency. Like, we're gonna muscle through it. I may not like it, and I may complain the whole time, but I'm gonna push through it.
I think a lot of people don't see that in this industry about the people that are in the industry working and pushing and doing things, being involved, is that, you're gone a lot from home.
Oh, yeah.
You're even when you're home, sometimes you're not home.
Yeah, and man, this industry will give you a complex. Like, I've always thought of myself as a hard-working person. My work ethic doesn't scratch the surface of these trainers,
right?
Or even their team members, their lopers, their assistant trainers, everybody on their team and their spouses, the sacrifices that they make and the children that now, a lot of them are fortunate enough to where they're on the road with them and they spend time that way, but it is a sacrifice to be in this industry. And I've gotten it, like, I'm pretty competitive, and so I'm like, man, I got to work harder. I got to be more. Yeah, I'm looking like a slacker compared to these guys. Right. But then I got a work-life balance I got to maintain too. But I'm grateful for the sacrifice my family was willing to make to relocate to an area they're unfamiliar with and build new relationships and walk away from the ones that they had. So I'm grateful for their willingness to follow suit, and I hope that stems from leadership, that I'm setting an example to where they wanted to do that it didn't feel like they did it against their will.
Right. Well, I'm going to ask this question with everybody. So if you had to tell yourself at 18 something different, a different path, or you had to tell an 18-year-old, listen to this right now, what would you have done differently from that age?
Some of the most sound advice I think I hear consistently out of self-made people or people I perceive as successful is to focus on the journey and not the destination. I can know that can get a little bit hoity-toity sounding and highbrow and philosophical, but it really is true. If you can focus on, like, how do I get better today instead of, like, how do I get to this outcome, I think you'll get there more rapidly, and then you'll come to enjoy that path a lot more. Expectation is the thing I struggle with the most, is expectation. I set expectation for myself for an outcome. Say, like, for this show, like, I want this broadcast to look this way, I want this to happen. When those things don't fall in line, I get irritated because I set an expectation rather than knowing that there's going to be adversity, knowing there's things I might have to overcome, and just taking them in stride and being appreciative and grateful along the way. That's hard to do, to genuinely feel that way. It's hard to do. So I'd like tell myself, like, those, hey, you just came off of at 18, so you're 8 years into filming this show for your dad. Do you think that it's unfair to you because you don't feel like you're properly compensated? But the life lessons and the things that you're going to get to experience that you didn't know were even possible for yourself are coming. So just hang in there and enjoy it, because it's a pretty cool ride.
Yeah, it really is, and it's not as bad. It's like going to college, more or less, and you surround yourself by good people.
Yeah.
And naturally things will happen. Money's just a tool. Don't make it.
The relationships are everything, dude. And I know that's another one of those kind of like cliche deal, but it is, man. Like, build relationship. Who gets you the job. What keeps you the job.
Right.
So just keep building relationships. Don't burn bridges. That's really hard to do, especially if you feel like you've been wronged. But you gotta just kind of put it behind you and move forward and keep focused on doing a good job for the next thing.
Yes, sir. I believe that. Well, I'm going to wrap this up because I know you got to get to work.
Yeah, man.
Me and you could probably talk for
forever. I've enjoyed
12 hours. But
I'm not used to being on this side of the camera. This is kind of cool.
I know. I like it. Well, I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, dude.
Take care.
Thanks.
Each and every Tuesday, catch a new episode of Grit Branded as we dive into stories from all walks of life in the hopes of you discovering what your grit is.